Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. This morning we are going to talk about the community designations for the Food Desert Program as part of the Economic Recovery Act. Get started just for the essence of time. My name is Patience Purdy. I'm here with the EDA, and I'm going to go over just some parameters around the session in general and then turn it over to the experts to talk about the program specifically. It's part of the Economic Recovery Act, which Governor Phil Murphy signed into law on January 7th of 2021. The ERA created a package of tax incentive, financing, and grant programs created to build a stronger and fairer New Jersey economy. It is both a broad-based recovery bill and a reform bill to better position New Jersey to recover from the economic crisis created by the COVID-19 pandemic, while still remaining true to the NJEDA and the state's commitments to transparency and accountability. You can visit the EDA's website at www.njeda.com/Economic Recovery Act to learn more about each of the programs within the ERA or to provide general ERA feedback. Opportunities for engagement. So this is one of them, and we had another last night, and there may be some of you on this morning that joined last night and just couldn't get enough and wanted to join us again. We are committed to transparency, equity, and faithful stewardship of taxpayer dollars, and we welcome constructive input from all New Jerseyans as we work through the process of implementing the programs under the ERA. We are providing multiple opportunities for public input. Today's session is just one way that we're collecting informal program-specific feedback. Executive Order number 63. The EDA is providing the opportunities for groups and stakeholders to engage with us in designating food desert communities pursuant to the Food Desert Relief Act. We welcome, again, your constructive input on how to ensure new programs created through the ERA are structured and administered in a manner that drives opportunities for all residents and communities. The EDA session will begin with a presentation to summarize the program, and after that, the opportunity for public feedback will be available. We're expecting around 75 to 90 minutes strictly for public input. Next slide, please. You can also submit written feedback on the Food Desert Community Designation via www.njeda.com/program-specific-feedback through February 4th. Our public feedback policy. We're soliciting verbal feedback by using the raise hand function as part of Zoom. So you can raise your hand at any point during the session. What it will do is put you into a queue in order. We will not ask for that feedback until the presentation has concluded, however. And each member of the public who wishes to speak during the feedback period, again, use the raise hand function in Zoom. We'll acknowledge the speaker in the order in which they raise their hand. We'll open your microphone. At that time, we're going to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us where you're calling from as well. To ensure that everyone that chooses to has an opportunity to speak, we're going to ask everyone to be very concise in their feedback and try and keep their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. We understand that may not happen, and we're not going to put a big hook out on the stage and pull you off if you run a little over. So don't worry about that, but please try to be as concise as possible. If we have time at the end, after everyone has had an opportunity to speak, we'll ask people that want to provide further comments to raise their hands again. Please don't expect to engage in a very specific dialogue with the staff. We're here to clarify elements of the program and of the designations, but not to speak to any kind of specific project. And then again, this is a public session, so we ask everyone to be courteous and polite to our fellow speakers and our presenters. I'm going to turn it over now to Tara Colton with the NJEDA, and she'll start walking you through the Food Desert Community Data.
Thank you, Patience. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tara Colton. I'm the Executive Vice President for Economic Security at the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. I'm going to be doing a tag team presentation with an extraordinary colleague, Dr. Christopher Wheeler, who's the Chief Data Officer at the Department of Community Affairs. You can go to the next slide, please. We're going to provide an overview of the Food Desert Relief Act, the data and methodology that ultimately generated the proposed map and list. And then, as Patience said, we are reserving the a majority of time for this session to listen and hear from you. We had a wonderful session last night. We heard from many people. There was a lot of rich and constructive feedback and dialogue, and we really are listening, and that's what today is all about. Just to share some context as we get started. So the Food Desert Relief Act is part, as Patience said, of the Economic Recovery Act of 2020, which is a package of bills that Governor Murphy signed into law early last year. Within that legislation, there are a number of programs that the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, the EDA, is implementing that are new versions of efforts and products that the EDA previously offered. There are also a number of programs that are brand new, and the Food Desert Relief Act, we're proud to say, is one of them. This is really a commitment from Governor Murphy, from Lieutenant Governor Oliver, and our partners in the legislature, Speaker Craig Coughlin, who's been a huge champion of this, as well as our partners across government, the Department of Community Affairs, Department of Agriculture, Department of Health, Department of Human Services, and others have worked collaboratively with us to develop this proposed approach. The Food Desert Relief Act is, again, a part of the law under the Economic Recovery Act that provides the EDA the authority to develop a pretty robust toolkit for addressing and combating food insecurity, including efforts to alleviate food deserts. The term food desert is often has a fairly rigid connotation in terms of how it's used at the federal level, particularly among the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And I want to just sort of set the stage as we begin that our efforts, and I think you'll see this brought to life in the methodology as Dr. Wheeler walks through it, our effort is to take a broad and comprehensive approach, really focused more broadly on food security. So the notion of a food desert certainly includes the presence or absence of food retail, but it doesn't start or stop there. And so as we look at what it means to live in a, quote, food desert, really what we're also looking at is accessibility, affordability, and a lot of the generational disinvestment that has been made into communities that, really needs to be addressed comprehensively. So I know there are some folks who bristle at the term food desert because it implies it's naturally occurring like a desert, but want to just sort of get ahead of that and reinforce that we're aware of that concern, but also that our efforts, and I think you'll see the proofs in the data, our efforts are really targeted to try and take as broad an approach as possible. So the Food Desert Relief Act provides the EDA with up to $40 million a year for 6 years, so $240 million, almost $250 million to address food insecurity and alleviate food deserts. We will be able to do that through a number of programmatic efforts. We are able to provide tax credits for new grocery stores and supermarkets in designated food desert communities. However, the law also gives the EDA the ability to sell the tax credits, some or all of the tax credits, and use the proceeds to support grants, loans, and technical assistance. As you'll see on the left-hand side of the slide, some of the areas of focus under the Food Desert Relief Act are strengthening existing community assets, which includes certainly corner stores, bodegas, farmers markets, a lot of different community gardens, places where folks access healthy, affordable food, and that we feel are vital to sustaining the path forward as we look to improve food security for all New Jerseyans. There is an explicit focus in the law around e-commerce and the transition, particularly of SNAP, federal nutrition benefits, to being able to be utilized online. New Jersey, in the last 18 months or so, has begun implementing the utilization of SNAP at online retailers, and there is explicit intent in the law to expand where SNAP can be used online, and that's something that our partners at the Department of Human Services are really taking the lead on. And similarly, we're working with our partners at the Department of Health as they transition the WIC federal program from paper-based vouchers to an EBT card. And so again, looking at food access and food affordability is really crucial to what we're doing here. We also have the ability under the law to identify and support innovative solutions to food security. And that's where we think we'll be able to some extent experiment and learn from the communities about the kinds of approaches that may truly move the needle on these issues. And there's just some data on the right-hand side about the scope of food insecurity in New Jersey, knowing that many New Jerseyans don't know where their next meal is coming from. We're very proud that the work that we are implementing here is part of the governor's agenda for a stronger and fairer New Jersey. I think it's worth noting that the state's economic development agency is the one that's charged with implementing this, which really reinforces that food security is vital to economic development. It's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. In the coming months, we'll have much more information and a subsequent round of listening sessions around the programmatic work that we will be rolling out. But today is focused on the Food Desert Community Designation process. So the Food Desert Relief Act directs the EDA to work with the Department of Community Affairs and the Department of Agriculture to designate up to 50 food desert communities. You'll see this term FDC in some of the materials, and that's what that refers to. As you'll see in the highlighted language, the law is prescriptive in that it says each food desert community has to be contiguous, but it sets no other parameters in terms of size or population or density. And so that's what we have spent the last number of months deeply focused on, taking the direction of what's in the law and the data points that are highlighted in the law as required for consideration, but not stopping there. And many of the folks in this call may be aware that a few months ago, the EDA issued a request for information, an RFI, that was focused in large part on building this definition and getting it right. And so as we looked for input on factors that could signal the presence of a food desert, again, using a more comprehensive and holistic approach to that terminology, we got a ton of really valuable substantive feedback. And you'll see as Dr. Wheeler goes through the methodology, that was taken very much to heart and is truly reflected in some of the expanded methodology that we've implemented. And a lot of the feedback that we received was focused on things like food swamps, where there is access to food, but it may not be healthy food, as well as taking a broader approach to the factors, again, sort of that occur in a community that impact accessibility and affordability of food, not just is there food retail, yes, no. So under the law, the EDA, working with DCA and Department of Agriculture, is charged with developing this list, which is what we're presenting today. And we also have the ability in 3 years to add additional food desert communities. So that could be adding number 51, 52, et cetera. We're really pleased and proud of how far we've come with this level of analysis. We believe it's the most comprehensive effort of any state in the country to develop food desert community designation. And we also want to get it right, knowing that it's an art, not a science. And so that's why I'm going to turn it to Dr. Wheeler in a moment, and he's going to walk us through the methodology. And then we're going to, just like we did last night, really sit and listen. We will be able to weigh in if there's any clarifying questions or things of that nature, but truly excited to hear from all of you. Dr. Wheeler?
Thank you, Tara. So again, my name is Christopher Wheeler. I'm the Chief Data Officer at the Department of Community Affairs, and I played a major role in developing the methodology for selecting food desert communities. So today I'm very happy to share with you a little bit more detail about the methodology, how we developed, and what went into the actual designations. We kind of started this process by looking closely at the Food Desert Relief Act for guidance as to what we should consider. So there were a number of metrics within the Act that we were kind of instructed to examine. So we were able to pull data on those metrics. And as you can see on the left, included items such as poverty, supermarket access, vehicle access, unemployment, obesity rates, municipal distress through the Municipal Revitalization Index, and also kind of proximity to healthier food options measured by the CDC's Modified Retail Food Environment Index. We supplemented those measures by measures that we identified through a comprehensive literature review on food deserts. So looking at several academic studies, we were able to determine a number of possible signals of a food desert community from the literature. And that included a wide array of things ranging from walkability of the neighborhood to racial and ethnic demographics, education levels, health indicators, and other metrics. Also, the number of students with a free or reduced price lunch and the residents under age 18. So after pulling together all those metrics, we really wanted to kind of supplement that with grounded intelligence from persons that either deal with food insecurity themselves or are involved in dealing with these issues at the community level to ameliorate any negative impacts from these issues. So as Tara mentioned, there was a robust request for information process. We received a wealth of helpful suggestions and comments from that process. And from analyzing those responses, we came up with some additional indicators that were not already captured from the statute or the literature review. So you can see those below. Access to unhealthy food retailers, we created a metric of a food swamp where we were closer to an unhealthier option than a healthier retail food option. You were categorized as a food swamp. Differences in income relative to the cost of living and the public safety environment, the municipal violent crime rate. So we took all those metrics and ran it through a statistical analysis known as factor analysis. And factor analysis is used to measure the presence of a latent variable that might be evident from a joint correlation of multiple variables. So our theory was that if we pull together all these metrics, we should see some kind of joint relationship between them that would signal a distinct presence of a food desert community. And after running several iterations of this analysis, we arrived at a variety of indicators that fall within 5 different categories. The first is the food retail environment. So the Food Desert Relief Act was very specific in defining a food desert community as an area where residents had limited access to healthier, nutritious food options. So we conducted a limited supermarket area analysis. We used data that was current as of the time of the analysis, and that was about spring of 2021. We pulled data on supermarkets throughout the entire state and also measured the selling area of those supermarkets to gauge their size. So larger supermarkets are most likely to offer healthier food options. We know that from the literature. And smaller markets are less likely to have healthy options. So our analysis really identified those areas that lacked larger supermarkets and warehouse stores and other food retailers that would tend to offer a wider variety of healthier options. So the limited supermarket areas were those areas that may have supermarkets or grocery stores, but they tend to be smaller ones that have the fewer food options, or they have no grocery stores or food retailers at all. We also did a food swamp analysis, as I discussed earlier, in conjunction with that to create a more diverse measure of the food retail environment, combining that with the CDC Modified Retail Food Environment Index. The next set of indicators, the demographics, a lot of this came from the RFI process. We included data on the percentage of single mother households, racial demographics, and educational indicators. We also included economic factors such as the poverty rate, income, unemployment rate, reliance on public benefits. And of course, health factors are very critical here. So we pulled in the population that was obese, and the population of adults rating their health as poor or fair. And there were a number of community factors. A lot of these were wonderful selections from the RFI process. Access to the internet, and that would basically give you enhanced access to ordering food from electronic means online. Housing vacancy, housing cost burdens, percentage of households without a vehicle, walkability of the community, your ability to actually walk to a supermarket if you have one in close proximity, and of course the public safety environment. In making the designations, we started out with a couple of conditions to ensure that we had a wide breadth of communities that were eligible for designation, and that the size of the communities was not too large, such that resources could be allocated efficiently to meeting the specific needs of the food desert community. So we started with a minimum of 1,000 residents and a maximum of 50,000 residents, and that partially determined the actual size and boundaries of the food desert communities. We decided that a single municipality could have more than one food desert community, just to come in under those 50,000 population limit. And a number of communities such as Camden, Newark, and Patterson have multiple food desert communities because they have such large areas and populations that are living in food desert areas. So we broke those up. We decided to allow food desert communities to cross multiple municipal borders. Again, within the limit of 50,000 residents. This allowed us to capture more areas of the state that are food deserts within the 50 food desert limit. So you'll notice that there might be some communities that are different in character together, but are part of the same food desert community. We generally linked together food deserts that bordered each other to maintain the contiguity within different municipalities. So you'll see, for example, Montclair and Orange are linked primarily because they are bordering food deserts, and the combination of their populations comes under that 50,000 threshold. And again, to assure geographic diversity, the highest scoring food desert community for each county was included on the final list to ensure that every part of New Jersey that has food desert characteristics has a shot of receiving this designation. So all 21 counties have at least one food desert community. So after running that factor analysis, we developed what was called a food desert factor score ranging from 0 to 100. This was produced for every census block group in the state. Block groups are smaller than a census tract. They roughly correspond to neighborhoods, and they're generally home to 600 to 3,000 people. Now, depending on the size of the food desert community could have a small number of block groups in the case of Salem City, which is a small municipality, or dozens of block groups, such as the Newark North Central one, which had 50 different block groups. Each block group received an individual food desert factor score that ranged from 0 to 100. And a higher score indicated that the block group had more qualities consistent with being a food desert community. So for example, Salem's food desert community covers just 3 block groups, and they had respective food desert factor scores of 75, 62.7, and 54.1. However, the population weighted average of all 3 of those block groups was 64.2. So in doing the rankings of food deserts, we took the average of 2 approaches. So the highest ranking food desert factor score, so for in Salem City, that would have been 75, and then the populated weighted average of all constituent block groups, which was 64.2. So when you add those 2 together and divide by 2, you get the average, and that we refer to as the composite food desert factor score, which determined the ranking of food deserts. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about the food desert communities. I'm going to turn it back over to Tara Colton.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wheeler. And I'm going to spend just a couple minutes walking us through the overview and the list. And then we're going to begin the public feedback part of this conversation. So just as a snapshot, as Dr. Wheeler said, all 21 of New Jersey's counties have at least one food desert community within them. I want to spend a moment on this next point because it's an important one, and I know that the way the data is presented, it may be a little confusing. When you see the name of a municipality on the list, in most cases, not all, it is only a portion of the municipality that is included in the food desert community, because the guiding geographic building block here was these block groups. And so most municipalities are comprised of multiple block groups. So the food desert community is a combination of block groups within a municipality. In some cases, this is synonymous with the entire municipality, in the example of Salem that you'll see on the next slide. When you're reviewing the list, there are asterisks next to the municipalities that are, it's all the block groups in that municipality. In other words, it's the whole municipality. But in most cases, when you see the name of a municipality on here, it does not mean that the entire area is considered a food desert community. So what this means is that on our list, there are 50 slots. As Dr. Wheeler said, there are a number of municipalities that, because of the size and acuity of their food desert community population, have been subdivided into multiple food desert communities. So each of those has less than the maximum population of 50,000. And so that means that for Camden, Elizabeth, and Patterson, they've each been, and Lakewood, excuse me, for Camden, Elizabeth, Patterson, and Lakewood, they've each been divided into 2. For Jersey City, it's been divided into 3, and Newark has been divided into 4. So when you look at the full list together, and all the municipalities that are also contiguous, so as Dr. Wheeler said, there are some where if they border one another but combined don't reach the threshold of 50,000, they may occupy one slot on the list. There are 57 municipalities in the state that at least a portion of that municipality is included in a food desert community. Collectively, the population among all 50 proposed communities is 1.32 million. And as you'll see, when we set the parameters of a minimum size of 1,000 residents and a maximum size of 50,000 residents, we come with an average among the 50 communities around 26,000. So as you'll see, I'm going to walk through how to read this table in a moment. There is very significant geographic diversity in the food desert communities. It shows that hunger and food insecurity and limited food access isn't a rural or suburban or urban issue. It's really a New Jersey issue. The food desert communities themselves are spread throughout the northern, central, and southern regions of the state. So just a quick rubric on how to read this. Again, as Dr. Wheeler said, the sort of what is at the heart of this is the composite food desert factor score. So higher score means that the community has more attributes of a food desert. And so the higher the score, the higher the ranking on our list. So you're looking at this list from the highest ranking food desert community to the lower rankings. If you see the name of a community in blue, it means it's one of those 6, Camden, Patterson, Lakewood, Elizabeth, Jersey City, and Newark. It's one of those 6 that has been subdivided into more than 1. If you see an asterisk, it means that for that community with the asterisk next to it, the entire municipality is included in the food desert community. So for instance, number 12, you see Bridgeton, Fairfield Township, Lawrence Township. That means that it's only part of Bridgeton because there's no asterisk. There's only part of Fairfield, but it's all of Lawrence Township. And so that's our effort to try and signal where it is the entirety of the municipality. As you'll see, it's a handful on this slide and a handful on the next slide, but in most cases, when you see a community listed here, it is not the entire municipality. Again, you'll see on the counties that there's real spread throughout the state. And the composite factor score that Dr. Wheeler walked through is the result of that equation that we showed you a couple of slides ago. So again, that's taking the average of the highest scoring block group within that community and then the population weighted average of all the block groups, putting those two together and coming up with a composite score, and that's what this number is. And then the last column is within the block groups that are part of that food desert community, how many people live in them. A block group is smaller than a census tract. It usually has between 600 and 3,000 people. And so the population that's listed here, again, is not, in most cases, the population of the municipality or city. It's the population located within those block groups. So if you add up everything in the far right column on this slide and the next slide, you get the 1.32 million number of total residents. If you go to the next slide, please. And again, this is similarly, just again, blue means it's one of the subdivided ones. Asterisk means in that case, it's the entire municipality. And again, you'll see the range in size within the food desert community itself from closer to 1,000 all the way up to almost 50,000. And all of these materials, the list, the interactive map, which is a GIS map that you can navigate and zoom in on and check out the details, a very thorough methodology, thanks to Dr. Wheeler. It's about 20 pages long about how the analysis was conducted, and the raw data itself is all available for download on the NJEDA site, along with these slides. So, this is really our commitment to transparency and feedback, and really eager to hear what folks think. Our timeline is, as was mentioned earlier, we will be accepting comments through February 4th, and then the final set of materials that will be presented to the New Jersey EDA board is anticipated to go to our board on the next board meeting, which is February 9th. So with that, I'm going to stop and turn it back to Patience, who I think is going to reinforce some of the guidelines for feedback, and then I know we have some folks in the queue already. Thank you so much. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thanks, Tara, and thank you, Dr. Wheeler. So again, public feedback policy, raise your hands. There are some hands raised already. We'll call on you individually in order. We'll ask you to remain concise in your comments so that everyone has an opportunity. If that timer gets down to 0 and you still have a prudent point to make, we're not going to cut you off, but we will let you know that your time is coming to a close. Please be courteous to your other attendees and the panelists when you make your comments, and we're going to get started. Great. So I've given you the ability to unmute yourself, Marcellus, and if you could introduce yourself and let us know where you're calling from prior to making your comment. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
All right, awesome. Oh, so just thank you for putting this on. This is really exciting. My name is Marcellus Counts, and I'm here representing Apiary in the Sky, urban beekeeping and farming organization in Newark. So my question is in reference to speaking on behalf of other grassroots organizations. So when I see like a lot of big funding being released, my concern is, what is there going to be done to like make sure that it's equitable for like smaller businesses and smaller organizations who are on the ground working with people, but may not have the capacity or, are still like kind of growing.
Okay, so, thanks, Tara.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for your question. This did come up last night as well, and one of the points that I made then is that in the Food Desert Relief Act, there is an explicit focus on establishing a technical assistance fund, which will, among other things, provide support and assistance for a range of efforts related to food security. And so understanding that there may be support needed to help develop programs and ensure that the funds that are available are distributed equitably, and that the access that is needed is provided to all corners of New Jersey. It also really aligns with a lot of the work that Governor Murphy and the EDA have been leading over the past 2 years, where we've distributed close to $800 million to small businesses, and a big part of that has been led through technical assistance that we've provided to, again, ensure that there's equitable access to the resources that are there. So your comment is very well taken. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Marcus Sibley. Marcus, I've unmuted you, so you should be able to talk.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Marcus Sibley, New Jersey State Conference NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Chairman. Just want to thank you for putting on this webinar this morning. This is very important. Food deserts are a tremendous problem, and for all the different fights throughout the state, if there's food insecurities, is always going to impact your fight. So this is why you probably have a lot of different advocates on this call today, because if a person doesn't have proper nourishment, it's hard to focus on other areas of their lives. But my question is about, because we're speaking about equity and we're speaking about white supremacy and racism that is very serious in our country and also in our state. So when I think about these different areas, traditionally exploited areas, when the subsidies go to provide, supermarkets or what have you, what kind of mechanisms or accountability is going to be put in place to ensure that after these entities receive that funding, that they will still carry on in an equitable fashion? And I ask that question because many times in these environments, from growing up in Newark, I've seen First and the 15th, different stores start raising their prices to link up at the time that people were receiving their government assistance, so that they know people had money, so they would raise the prices. So my curiosity is, are there any mechanisms in place to ensure that this can be equitable and make sure that there's accountability for when they receive these funds, that they will have to continue in an equitable and fair fashion? Thank you so much for your time today.
Marcus, thank you for your comment, and it is something that we are looking into. What I would suggest is that you also take the time to make that comment via the written feedback form that's on the NJEDA website, and the link to that is in the chat. We do appreciate it, and it's a great comment. We don't have a specific answer for you right now, but it is something that we're looking at. Thanks so much for joining and for making the comment.
Thank you.
Our next public comment is Shauna Monridge. Shauna, I've given you the permission to unmute yourself. If you would introduce yourself and let us know where you're calling from prior to making your comment. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Shauna Manridge from the Passaic County Food Policy Council. I am part of the Residency Advisory Board. I was on the call last night as well. And I just have a few questions. One is, how do you designate a supermarket? Is it a supermarket like a full size, was there a square footage designation, or are we talking corner stores, bodegas that are supermarkets? Because in Patterson, we have a lot of corner stores, but we don't have a lot of actual supermarkets. Also, there was talk of getting fresh or getting healthier foods to the areas. We can get the quantity of healthier foods, but the quality has to be there. That has to be more key than the quantity of the foods, because our bodegas in our corner stores has loads of vegetables and fruits, but they're all rotting away. And like the previous gentleman said, also the pricing of the foods. We've had a meeting with the advisory board a couple of days ago where we were talking about pricing and, again, the quality of the food. If we had 150 stores in Patterson and pulled 10 items, out of the 150, we would get 149 stores with maybe 8 of those items expired. So how do we prevent that from happening as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. And I'm going to ask Dr. Wheeler if he can come back on video to answer at least the first portion of your question.
Sure, that's a wonderful question. So we actually used a proprietary data set that identified all the supermarkets, convenience stores, general food retail outlets that sell groceries, in doing our analysis. And that data set had a tag for whether each outlet was a supermarket or not. So we included all the supermarkets in the analysis, but also natural food stores, warehouse stores such as Costco and Sam's Club. We also included Walmart's and military commissary stores. So it was actually a pretty broad definition of supermarket that we utilized. And you can find the full detail in the methodology document. We made a critical distinction between major supermarkets of 20,000 selling square feet or more, which tend to have larger healthy food options, and those that are smaller, such that food desert communities typically would have concentrations of those smaller retailers, maybe from an independent chain or a smaller regional chain that had limited healthy food options.
Thanks, Dr. Wheeler. Shauna, thanks for joining us. I'm going to the next hand raise, and I'm going to apologize in advance for anyone whose name I mispronounced from the start. Please correct me when you introduce yourself. It looks like Shlomi Hallberg. I've given you the permission to unmute yourself. If you could introduce yourself and let us know where you're calling from, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. I come from, I enrolled in the Rabbinical College in Lakewood, New Jersey. And I found at the time that there was no economic, ability for people to buy the food they wanted because the prices were extremely high. Selection was limited. What I actually did was I became a wholesaler that delivered to private people. And over the years, this goes back 42 years ago, over the years, we opened up a small store. But again, a large store would be so much more convenient. We like healthy food. The large supermarkets and even the kosher large supermarkets don't tend to coach for healthy food. It's oil and all kinds of things that people shouldn't be eating. I'm afraid it contributes a lot to the obesity in the area too. I was just wondering if you use demarcations by state highway. In other words, one side and another other than, mileage. Because a lot of customers don't have cars and they walk.
Yes, I can answer that. That was a great question. So we did take into account the walkability of the neighborhood. That was one of the components of the food desert factor score. And we did kind of geographically validate the food desert. So after running the statistical analysis and the Excel spreadsheet, we did examine very closely the food deserts to ensure that there were not any kind of major barriers, whether it be bodies of water or major, interstate highways, that would obstruct people's access and that could be, biasing the selections. So through that process, I think we came up with a pretty good set of boundaries that kind of took those kind of barriers into account. We also deliberately looked at major highways, bodies of water, other major barriers to transportation in crafting the food desert boundaries, such that if there was an area that received a new supermarket, we wouldn't have a whole portion of that food desert that couldn't access a new supermarket because of such a barrier.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Wheeler. So next we have Jennifer Salt. Jennifer, I've allowed you to unmute yourself. If you could introduce yourself and let us know where you're calling from, please.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Salt. I'm the director of SNAP Ed from Sioux Falls Health Centers. I have a question. Well, I want to say thank you for your work, and I appreciate that there are more factors than distance to grocery stores used in the determination of the food desert communities. However, it came up in a meeting this morning. Some of these factors may not change by adding a grocery store or increasing e-commerce availability, such as like the demographics or community factors. So our concern is this means that the food desert community designation will most likely not change even if healthy food access is increased for the community. Is this a concern as there may not be a resolution for the designation after the program or funding is over?
Well, I think one of the critical components of the designation, and this was, really drawing upon the requirements of the statute, was that the area has to have limited access to nutritious foods, for the residents. So to the extent that an area received an abundance of healthier options, I think it's probably less likely to be designated a food desert in the future. So, conditions as they change, may determine, what those communities are as this is updated on an ongoing basis.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And just a quick second question is, how likely is it that these communities will change? I know you guys put a lot of work into it, so I'm not sure how likely you'll see a difference when you come out with the final list.
Well, I think the most likely thing to change is the actual, food retailer environment. So, when we revisit this, I'm sure we'll be pulling in the latest version of the food retailer data and then making determinations, based on that.
Okay, so the 50 communities are probably pretty set at this point.
Yeah, they are pretty, the criteria that are used to designate them, generally don't change as much. The most frequently changing item is the food retailers, which can close or open, as you can imagine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. We'll move to the next speaker. I just want to encourage anyone with a comment. There's some comments in the chat. And if you pose your comment by raising your hand, then you give everyone here the benefit of hearing the response and hearing your comment. Our next public commenter is Susan Cercio. Susan, I've given you permission to talk. If you would just introduce yourself and let us know where you're calling from, please.
Hi, good morning. I'm calling from Fairview, New Jersey, obviously. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you. Thank you for having the wisdom and the courage during this pandemic to really come out and examine food insecurity in New Jersey. And we know from your study and from the benchmarks and factors that you've used, food insecurity has no boundaries. Having said that, we here in Fairview have been a recipient of the Serve and Sustain Meals, which has been another program sponsored by NJEDA. And we're receiving about 1,800 hot meals a week, which serves our community. We are a community who is enthusiastically and graciously, awaiting this food designation so that we can support our community. And I guess in taking a look at this, it really is going to take a village. It's not just, us trying to do this, but it's going to be robust. It has to be creative. It has to be comprehensive and collaborative, because we know that by itself, food insecurity does not just exist, that the other factors of schools and education and being able to put these pieces, social services, capitalizing on all the things that are around us to support this. And I do believe that it has a formula to be extremely successful if, in fact, we begin looking at it as an entire project of the community and of our resources. We have a lot of resources out there. In my community, SNAP and WIC are very rarely capitalized on. So for us, it's going to be to explore all of the services that we have that we can now implement, and hopefully, empower the community and our folks to become a little bit more eating healthier. We have a very large immigrant population. The only transportation they have, to get food is a stroller. The stroller is used for their child, for laundry, and for food. So we're a community that's desperately in need of some support And we really look forward to working with NJEDA. And I want to say thank you again for having the courage and the wisdom to put this out.
Thank you, Susan.
Susan, thank you so much for your comment and the recognition of the Sustain and Serve New Jersey program. And for those who don't know, this is a program that Governor Murphy launched about a year ago that provides grants to organizations to purchase meals in bulk from local restaurants and then provide the meals for free. And we are on track to have purchased about 3.5 million meals by this spring, and we'll have a third phase of the program with an additional $10 million that the governor announced coming in the coming months. So really reinforces our commitment to a comprehensive approach to addressing food insecurity. So thank you for being a powerful spokesperson for the impact of that program. I also just wanted to emphasize something as we continue this conversation, because this has been incredibly valuable already, and I know there's a number more folks who want to speak. Certainly, I know I think Jennifer had asked a question about the likelihood of the communities to shift, and really what we are looking for through this process is an awareness that there is no perfect or straightforward way to do this. And so as you see in the materials we've laid out, this is our proposal at not just what the data sources should be, but also what the methodology should be to utilize those data sources. We are, through the public feedback process, looking for feedback on that approach. Just like we did through the request for information, which already has significantly shaped what the methodology is. So the data points that are used, many of them are not updated that frequently. Maybe they're updated annually or biannually. Some of them, as Dr. Wheeler said, are more live and up to date because of the retail environment shifting. So our goal has been to use the most recent data that's available at as granular a level as possible, which is the block group level. But we are looking for feedback on the designation process. And so our current goal is to present a final version of this to our board in early February that will be informed by this process. So if we, based on the feedback we receive, that could impact the ultimate version that goes to our board for consideration and review. And then I just also wanted to emphasize that you're not done with us, because this is a series of listening sessions and feedback on the designation process, but there will be a separate significant public feedback process around the programmatic strategy that we'll be rolling out. So as we look to develop regulations around the tax credits, the grants, the loans, the technical assistance that we'll be developing, that will be in the coming months, and there will be a number of opportunities for public feedback through that. So I wanted folks to be aware that we look forward to hearing you more as this program evolves.
Thanks, Tara. So note to everybody, bookmark the events tab on njeda.com and check the ERA portion of that website frequently for when these next listening sessions are going to come up. Our next speaker is Bilal Walker. Bilal, I've given you permission to unmute. If you would say hello and let us know where you're calling from, please.
Good morning. My name is Bilal Walker. I'm an educator and urban farmer in Newark, New Jersey. Wanted to ask a question around the designation of food deserts as it pertains to the implementation of more supermarkets. Curious to know if there are opportunities for vacant properties to be purchased for redevelopment into sustainable urban farms that can grow food year round. Newark has a bustling urban farming scene, and there's currently opportunities that farmers identify for actually creating food systems through the growing of their own farms or urban gardens. So wanting to know if any of the funds allocated from this Food Desert Act could go towards the purchasing of property.
I can answer that quickly. The short answer is potentially. The materials that we're presenting to you today are solely about the designations, the food desert community designations. So there's not something definitive I can give you that says, here's the allowable uses. That's what we're going to be coming up with over the next several months about potential programmatic structures for how the Food Desert Relief Act funds could be utilized. But the law itself and the scope of what we are envisioning would be broader, not narrower. So I think right now there's nothing that would prohibit that under the way the law is structured. And then as we, again, as I was saying, if please come back as we build out more program design resources, we'll be looking for more feedback on those in the coming months.
Thanks,
Thank
Tara.
you so much.
And for those of you also listening and looking to come back for future sessions, please follow us on social. We are at New Jersey EDA across all social platforms. Thank you. Next, we have Karen Moskowitz. Karen, I've given you permission to talk. If you'd say hello and let us know where you're calling from, please.
Thank you so much, Tara. I'm calling from Asbury Park, representing Interfaith Neighbors, and I'm very grateful to be living in a state like New Jersey where our governor and all of the other leaders like you are concerned about this issue. So thank you very much. I am kind of in solidarity with some of the other speakers. I do understand that this session is about the designation of communities, but I have concerns moving forward about programmatic decisions. I would love if there could be some sort of community board that could be at the table immediately so that the decisions that are made reflects the concerns, such as the one that was just raised about land sovereignty. I also am concerned, like another speaker, about majority of funds that might go into supermarkets, because as we've learned, supermarkets have been cited in, quote, food desert areas that have not resulted in changes to health or access, because it's really an economic issue that people are experiencing. I mean, you could live right next to ShopRite and you just can't afford to go in there and buy fruits and vegetables. And in the RFI period, we suggested a study of work that's going on right now in England, where the community and the supermarkets and the government all got together to try to work together on all the issues we talked about, with Shlomi mentioning that the stores are not offering healthy food, that those kind of issues. And I also would like to urge there be some sort of connection with other departments, because as we move forward with the EDA, sorry, there's a dog in the background here. As we move forward with the Food Desert Relief Act, at the same time, there's other agencies in New Jersey that are working against food security. For example, I just found out this morning that the state is going to end their organic certification program for farmers. And I guess that's going to happen immediately. They're going to be dropped from certification. There's also free EBT SNAP machines that were available previously that are now not available to be used at farmers markets for people to use their SNAP benefits at markets. So I would urge that any process moving forward programmatically includes other agencies so everybody is on the same page.
Thanks, Karen. And I know Tara is going to come on to respond, but I want to encourage everyone, when you're making these really substantive comments, and I see some folks mirroring those in the chat, encourage everyone to provide those via the written feedback system as well. It just emphasizes it. While we do record these and translate them, you may have some more time and a little more ability to be more specific in that written feedback portion. So we do encourage everybody to do that.
Thanks, Patience. And Karen, just on the point around the different agencies, that is absolutely how we're approaching this work. It's taking what Governor Murphy calls a whole of government approach. So we've been working throughout this process and will continue to work with the alphabet soup of state agencies. So Department of Agriculture, Community Affairs, Health, Human Services, Education, Office of the Secretary of Higher Education. They've all been part of the process as we've begun developing this model, shaping out the request for information, and then certainly as we go forward with programmatic and product development. And that is something that we my team is a little sick of hearing me say this, but I keep saying we have to solve the right problem. And so really what we're looking to identify as opportunities with the Food Desert Relief Act are areas where there are gaps or opportunities for catalytic support that could really have a lasting impact on food security and access, including affordability. And I'll just say as an example, you talked about the sort of coordination around SNAP, e-commerce, point of sale machines, that there is language in the law that's specifically around SNAP e-commerce, but we recognize that that's something that is administered by one of our sister agencies. And so that's why we continue to work really closely with them, because this is going to take a whole of government approach, and that's certainly modeled by the governor on down. And so very much take that to heart. Thank you.
Thanks, Tara. Our next speaker is Daryl Jackson. Daryl, you should be able to unmute yourself. Please say hello and let us know where you're calling from.
Hello, excuse me. Hello, Daryl Jackson, Paterson, New Jersey. I am with the Paterson State Council Food Policy Council, and I am also a representative of their resident advisory board. I joined the last meeting and I did speak. If you have other people that are in the queue, I see the time. I do allow them to go before me. I'll go last if there's time, because I think that you're already over the time, if not very close to it. So I appreciate it.
Daryl, if you have something you'd like to comment, please share now. You raised your hand. It's your turn.
Thank you so much. Well, I'll try to be quick. I already see less than 2.5 minutes. Someone mentioned earlier that they were from NAACP and mentioned quite a few things. I want to say that a lot of my questions come from the fact that I think basically from the perspective that he was thinking, but I tried to attack the questions or attack the situation from different from a different perspective. You guys mentioned that, and I think that what we're all talking about, and I think that what he was hinting at is the same thing I'm hinting at with my questions, which is that we want to make sure that in our communities, we actually see the effect of these programs, because we see these programs enter the communities, but we don't actually see or feel the effects. That's why we also later on get questions like, are they actually going to help or change the communities? So I see that it was factored in a food swamp, but what is the opposite of a food swamp? I'm assuming it might be just a food haven or something like that. And this is what we can consider quality food markets, quality supermarkets. There's a distinction between a supermarket, which has 20,000 square feet, I think you said, or larger or smaller, I'm not sure which one, but the fact of the matter is, that's the size, and it might serve a certain number of residents, but it still doesn't speak to quality, and which means that it'll fail, like she mentioned, I think it was Jennifer, because we won't visit that supermarket because it does not offer what we want, which is quality, which is nutrition, and desired certain specific foods for our diets. Some people have diabetes. Some people are from certain ethnic backgrounds and things like that. I think Jennifer also said, how likely will these communities change or something like that? And I said to myself, this is exactly what we're talking about, but some of our issue is that part of the conversation is missing. And I think that it's coming up. And so one sentence came to mind is that access and affordability of quality, nutritious, and desired foods. It's as simple as that. We don't have access to desired food. When we make it there, if we can, it's not affordable. And the ones that we can make it to, it's not quality, nutritious, and it's not what we desire or require for our diets or for our ethnic backgrounds and feeding our families. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think that someone spoke to that comment earlier, and we appreciate it and we hear you. The next speaker is Delia Davis. Delia, I have unmuted you, and if you could introduce yourself and let us know where you're calling from, please.
Hi, this is Delia Davis. I am calling as a resident of Plainfield and also a member of Social Justice Matters, which is an organization that seeks to create racial equity within the larger Union County area. And so I just had a question, I guess. Plainfield was listed as 44 out of 50 on the scored scale. And so I'm wondering maybe about the strategy of priority. You know, obviously the towns that have the higher scores might be addressed first, but I'm curious about the strategy as it relates to the whole government change that was referenced earlier. You know, how are the lower ranked cities being addressed? And then I think we all seem to still have questions about the grocery stores. I just was wondering if there's a score for how well they meet certain criteria. You know, is it that they have produce, when they get their produce, where they get their produce, how those, like, is it an FDA thing? Like, what's the health score, I guess, of a grocery store? Because obviously, you know, we have corner stores, but I wouldn't get food from, like, fresh food from those stores, even if they might sell them, type of thing. So just curious about if there's a scoring mechanism for any of the stores, convenience and grocery. And then maybe lastly, what are some of the immediate things that the community can do that, you know, outside of coming to these listening tours and giving the feedback and understanding that there are a lot of things underway, you know, how else can the community be supportive of these efforts outside of just raising awareness? I'm really trying to dig into more tangible impacts. And, you know, I know that that may be a difficult question to answer, obviously understanding that we're all community members and don't necessarily work, you know, at the office, but just wondering what there are some immediate tangible things that we can be doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Delia.
Thank you so much for your comment. Just responding to a couple of the points that you made. So in terms of the inclusion on the list, the Food Desert Relief Act, the law makes the funding that we have available to potentially, as the programs roll out, to all 50 of the food desert communities. That is all in terms of how it gets distributed and the eligible programs that it can be used for. That's still in development, and that's something that we'll be rolling out again for public feedback in the coming months. But inclusion on the list would, at a basic level, meet the initial eligibility criteria to apply for the funding that we'll be making available. It really, going to your, I think your third point around the feedback, we take suggestions and feedback very seriously. When we issued the request for information, we got about 36 responses. There are hundreds of pages in total, and we've read every word of all of them. And we would welcome feedback to continue that way. The point that you've made and some of the other speakers have made around the, you know, the sort of diversity of solutions, potential solutions to address these very complex issues. You know, in terms of what you can do, I think keep sending them our way. If there are promising models or efforts in other states or other countries that show promise, or there's a community-driven vision for what could take root, we would love to hear about that. It isn't necessarily on our radar. We do take community outreach and engagement very seriously, and we do our best, even in this bizarre virtual environment, to try and engage with folks in local communities. But we would really encourage you to share that information through the public feedback process, and certainly throughout the the coming months. And in terms of the grocery quality, I don't have a direct answer on that. I will say that as a fundamental limitation of our effort is that we are trying to get the most recent reliable data available at a very small geographic level. And so being able to achieve both of those goals, and I don't know if Dr. Wheeler has anything to add on that, but it's a challenge because you're trying to make sure the data is accurate, but that it reflects a catchment area of sometimes just a few hundred people. And there are not that many statewide data sets that you can use to capture that. And so we know there's some limitations. It's part of the challenge of doing this kind of very detailed sort of geographic analysis. But again, if there are things, methods that folks would recommend or we should be aware of, we believe we've done a very exhaustive literature review and best practice review, but we really are eager to learn. So feel free to send things our way.
Indeed, and just following up on that, I think that's a really great comment on the food quality. That was something that we had in mind from the onset. That's what we really wanted to measure, is the quality of food options within retailers throughout the state. As Tara said, there are a number of challenges as far as available data to measure that. Unfortunately, there isn't a comprehensive survey that looks at all the options in every food retailer in the state. So we kind of used the approach using the data we had available, again, using that proprietary supermarket data set from TV Links, and then looking at the gross selling area as a potential indicator of the diversity of offerings in the volume of nutritional options. And that's been a approach that's been used in other definitions by other entities in the past. But we supplemented that also by including the CDC's Healthy Food Environment Index. They had done a comprehensive analysis that had looked at proximity to healthier food retailers from their own analysis. So that was a piece of what went into the food desert factor scores that ultimately helped select the food desert communities.
Thank you, Dr. Wheeler. I'm going to pause for a moment and just pose the comment to Dr. Wheeler and Tara Colton. We've got Erica Nava from the Senate Majority Office, who is asking a question regarding the variables used to perform the factor analysis. Under the demographics, she sees that a % of Hispanics was used, but not immigrants, and notes these two variables are not mutually exclusive. Do we have a comment on that we'd like to share? Otherwise, I wanted to just make sure it was recorded as part of the public comment.
Sure, I think that's a great comment. So we looked at a variety of different variables. So the ones you saw in the presentation were not the ones that were initially considered. We had a very wide net that we cast. And we really just focused on the variables that had a very close correlation with each other to signal a food desert community. So what we ended up was kind of the things that the data were telling us that were aligned with the food desert.
Thank you, Dr. Wheeler. Our next speaker is Desmond Hayes. Desmond, I've unmuted you. If you would say hello and let us know where you're calling from, please. So Desmond, I see you're unmuted, but we couldn't hear you. Can we try again? We can hear you now.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Yes. Good morning. I'm Desmond Hayes. I'm calling from Geo Greens here in Hamilton, New Jersey. We're an indoor hydroponics vertical farm. And I've been speaking with Tara and the NJEDA team in the past. So when it pertains to this program, to piggyback off on so many good questions and statements that people on this call and the call last night, for example, today Jennifer and Marcus and Daryl, is there something that's going to be written into the program or some type of requirement in terms of outreach and implementation and more interaction and that educational value with like the community? I say that because a lot of these things can happen. This program can take off and it could be amazing. But at the end of the day, for example, I host tours in my facility and talk about hydroponics, indoor growing, nutritional values, and just to give that type of information so people have it when they can take home, they can start growing on their own and understand, certain crops and produce that they can use, fresh crops and produce they can use and take it back. Because a lot of that information is either, unknown or people just don't really care or it's not convenient enough for them to really look into it and understand a little bit more. And with this program in mind, knowing that certain places accept SNAP or understand what SNAP is, or the WIC program, and understanding those types of things of healthier eating, different types of microgreens, for example, that people aren't aware of, or different herbs and crops, things like that, that people really need to know so that they can actually take advantage of, you know, some of these things in this program, for example. Is there anything that will be, you know, implemented in addition to the food desert program, or is there something that can be written into it so that there is some type of outreach and, you know, educational value that comes with this? Because once, you know, outside of the access and availability, which obviously are big issues, if that's cured, it still needs to be something there that's telling people what's the benefit of eating these and how you can eat these, whether it be recipes and things like that can further the conversation. So is there anything that, you know, the question of the NJEDA, is anything that can be written? I don't know if it's a matter of more you know, information from the community, more of these types of talks, things like that. Is there any way we can ensure that educational value is also brought to the table too?
I think Tara Colton is going to respond to you real quickly here.
Hi, Desmond. Thanks so much for your question. And certainly we've heard that theme in some of the comments last night and then again today. My answer is going to be maybe a little frustrating because what I'm going to say is that potentially, yes, that all is going to be determined and developed through the program model that is not yet out for public feedback yet in a formal sense like this. So today's sessions are just around the designation process, though obviously we know they're only, you know, it's great to designate these communities, but then what happens after that is the million or maybe $240 million question. What I would say is that, again, the spirit and the letter of the law of the Food Desert Relief Act is broad and is intending to be comprehensive and creative in how we approach this and to think differently. And so as we begin this next phase of work, hopefully after the designation process is completed, after we've incorporated feedback and sort of set this in stone, or temporary stone, I suppose, we are really continuing to sort of redouble our efforts around program design and development. So like I said, there will be a formal process for that, but in the interim, again, we would really welcome suggestions, perspectives, models that have been done elsewhere. We heard a lot of that through the request for information. We got a ton of wonderful, thought-provoking ideas about what could be done or what has been done. And so it's certainly welcome those going forward. I don't have a firm answer yet to any of the questions about what the program can do because we have not yet put the program model formally out for feedback. And so just want to manage everyone's expectations there, but we are always in a sort of continuous learning environment. And so would really welcome if folks want to share things or send ideas our way.
Thanks, Tara. Our next speaker is Melinda Huerta. Melinda, you should be able to unmute yourself and provide comment. Please let us know where you're calling from, please.
Hi, my name is Melinda Huerta. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Melinda Huerta. I'm a West Orange Board of Education member, but just here as a regular resident of West Orange. I had a couple of comments about the e-commerce. I think that's going to be a very vital point. A lot of our bodegas might not take WIC or SNAP, and that giving them that access, giving our community members that access to being able to use their state benefits at these locations is going to be important. And my question is, in terms of WIC, what has been the thing that is stopping or the holdup with WIC becoming electronic as well? Because I know that it's still it's been for years paper based. Another thing is the education aspect of nutrition and how to eat healthy. I think that there should be a component to that as well in providing education on what kind of choices our families are making in terms of food. Sometimes they just eat what is available or what is distributed, and oftentimes that's not necessarily the most nutritious food. Even though it meets FDA standards, it's still not the most nutritious and of high quality. And so I think that's just echoing a lot of the feedback that's already been given. And how can we, school districts educate or help in this process as well? Whether it's community involvement or our food distributors, how can we help, or can our food distributors for our school districts have access, or do they have access to these kinds of funds to help distribute food to our communities as well? And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you so much, Melinda. On the point about WIC, so we're working closely with the Department of Health, which administers WIC for the state, on their transition from paper voucher to EBT card that started, I believe, in Mercer County in October and is slated to be rolled out across all 21 counties by this coming fall. And so one of the as that transition takes place, similarly with the rollout of online ordering for SNAP, there are likely to be opportunities to utilize the Food Desert Relief Act, given the explicit focus in the law around the transition to e-commerce and the importance of technology and equipment to support a broad array of food retailers to be able to accept and process SNAP online and in person, as well as the transition of WIC to an electronic card. So we are working closely with Department of Health and our counterparts at Department of Human Services who administer SNAP to, again, sort of identify where we believe there could be a lot of room for impact, as well as working with our colleagues at Department of Agriculture who administer a number of the programs supporting farms and farmers markets. And then in terms of your comments around education and nutrition education, et cetera, very well taken. And again, kind of reiterate that as we begin to really deepen the programmatic development, would welcome written feedback and models that we could look towards as we consider potential program design specs once we move past this designation process. Thank you.
Thanks, Tara. So a note happening in the chat right now about a hub for all of you that have attended, those of you that attended yesterday. What I would encourage is that we will not be sharing attendee information publicly as far as in order to connect you all, but that chat is open. If you would like to connect with each other, please use the chat and connect with each other. There are so many good ideas and considerate folks that you should all get together. Our next speaker is Mary Sellis. Mary, I have unmuted you and you should be able to speak, introduce yourself, and let us know where you're calling from, please.
Hi, my name is Mary Sellis. I'm the Director of Health Initiatives at the United Way of Passaic County. I oversee the Passaic County Food Policy Council, and we had 2 resident advisory board members here today who spoke, and I just want to thank them for attending. And first and foremost, just want to thank NJEDA for this very rigorous investigation of addressing food security and thinking about very deeply about how to address not just food security, but food access across the state, which is a very difficult endeavor considering how diverse and varied New Jersey communities are. So I just want to, acknowledge that and say thank you. My 2 questions, I have 2 questions. One is really related to this issue of food quality, which both residents, Daryl and Shauna, spoke to. And I think in part because when we look at particularly the map of the North Side neighborhoods in Patterson, there's some concern that part of the neighborhoods were excluded because they were too close in proximity to a few grocery stores that may be large in square footage or meet the square footage requirements, but do not offer high food quality in terms of quality of produce, in terms of offering expired items, and that residents don't want to shop there. And so in our written feedback, we will include the redevelopment maps that are eligible for the NRTC tax credit program, that, you know, just to make sure that you all are aware that there's development and incentives happening in parts of the map that were not included in the designation. And so we just want to be sure that you're aware of that. So I guess that's you know, a comment as much as a question in terms of, you know, can lines of maps be moved a little bit to make sure we're including areas of concern in communities. That's one. And then two, we're really excited about the fact that there are grants programmatically. And I know this isn't you know, this is not, we're not providing feedback on programmatic initiatives, but one thing that we're really excited about as a food policy council is thinking about affordability speaking to many of the comments around food security and affordability. And one thing that we have really been advocating for, but haven't had the funding for in Passaic County, are SNAP incentives for fresh fruit and vegetables at grocery stores or retail locations. So our question, you know, is related to that, and we can include that in the written feedback as well.
Thank you, we appreciate it. Our next commenter is Robert Wilt. Robert, I've unmuted your microphone, so you should be able to unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and let us know where you're calling from.
Yeah, sure. Like you said, my name is Robert Wilt. I'm involved in real estate development and investment. You know, I just wanted to echo everybody's comments, thanking you for putting this on. I think you guys do a great job identifying some of the problems, but wanted to talk about potential solutions, not just throwing money at the problem. For example, you guys have, you know, have you taken into account the availability of developable land in and around the food deserts? I know certain supermarkets have site selection criteria that require, you know, an average traffic count or certain acreage for a site selection, and that might not be available within the boundaries, but may be available slightly outside. And would locations slightly outside the food deserts potentially be able to take part in the program?
Okay, so the question about sounds more programmatic. I'll leave it to Tara to let me know if that's something that can be answered right now, but the question is, can a supermarket located outside of the designation but in proximity participate in the program? Am I getting that clearly?
Yeah. I mean, as an example, say something like Keensburg. We know that that's a food desert, but there's no locations with a traffic count that would support a supermarket moving there, or a town like Red Bank, which you know, has such high property values that you wouldn't be able to assemble enough acreage to build a supermarket. But meanwhile, maybe within a 5-mile radius of those locations, you would be able to do something. Would a location within a certain proximity be eligible potentially?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Robert. While sort of a broken record that we don't have specific programmatic specs to share yet, I can clarify or answer your question about the eligibility of a supermarket to be part of the programs that will be rolled out through the Food Desert Relief Act. The one very clear limitation that is laid out in the statute, in the law, is that in order to receive a tax credit, which is one of the 4 tools in our toolkit, the toolkit being tax credits, grants, loans, and technical assistance. So for a tax credit, a supermarket has to be the first or second new supermarket within a food desert community. So an existing supermarket within a food desert community or a supermarket outside of a food desert community cannot receive the tax credits that are in our toolkit. As we look to the other tools, grants, loans, and technical assistance, particularly given the growing changes in the grocery industry nationally and certainly here in New Jersey, and the explicit focus in the law around e-commerce, particularly the utilization of SNAP online. Again, we don't have programmatic details for response yet, but there is certainly an opportunity, I think, to think broadly about how to engage suppliers and purveyors of food. If ultimately the end goal is to provide food to the people, those 1.32 million people who reside in the food desert communities. So again, just sort of to reiterate, on the tax credit side, that is very clearly laid out in the statute that you must be within that food desert community. For the rest, that will be something that continues to evolve as we build out some of the program specs that we'll be putting out for review.
Thanks, Sarah. So our next speaker is Joan Healey. Joan, you should be able to unmute your mic, introduce yourself, and let us know where you're calling from.
Yes, thank you very much. Joan Healey from Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Mercer County, and with the SNAP Ed program. And I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. Again, thank you. I was here last night as well, and I've been mulling a couple of thoughts and continuing my plea for not only the supply side of this, which I know is in the economic development area, but the demand side. So I'm wondering if, because it's a little vague, the fourth goal notes identify and foster innovative solutions to alleviate food insecurity. If when these tax credits are given out, if there could be a condition for some activity by those who are benefiting from these credits to do what I actually formed into an acronym quite easily, Entice. So we all know that we need to eat fresh fruits and vegetables, but there are a whole lot of barriers that we ourselves encounter in our everyday lives. And then add to that, some of the situations that people have in the food deserts, which I would love to see move to food havens. I love that term. So for Entice, is there any part of this funding then that might go to the following? Ensuring that there is the education. We do have the statewide SNAP education group through Community Food Bank of New Jersey, Zufall Health, and Rutgers. Rutgers also is statewide as the land-grant university in the state. We have Department of Family and Community Health Sciences educators in representing most, if not all, counties in the state. So we're an easy resource for this. The N of Entice, nutritious foods. We've talked about this. And I spoke last night about our kind to switch our focus to nutrition security versus simply food security. And I know that that's a new topic that's coming up throughout the different food organizations in the country. The T is tastings. So how many of you, when you actually taste, let's say a lentil taco versus a beef taco, with lots of vegetables, might be more inclined to make it? So could it be required that there are some tastings that are done at these sites that receive these credits? The I is incentives. So we talk all about these double up bucks, having them provided at the supermarkets or the retail establishments, and other financial incentives that prompt trial, and hopefully lead to longer term sustainable, purchases. And then convenience. I think we all know that there are times when life gets crazy. And so for these supermarkets to offer foods that are they're healthy, but they're conveniently packaged, that this makes it easy to make the healthy choice. And finally, the E in Entice is economical. So, the price, we've talked about all of these, and so many people have summarized them. But just perhaps a way for us to kind of pull it all together with what I'm calling the demand side. People want to eat well. People want to be healthy. There's just so many barriers for people to do that. And so my final question, though, with that fourth goal, identify and foster innovative solutions to alleviate food insecurity, what I find interesting about that one, and I'm pleased about it, is the first three to me relate very specifically to economic issues, tax credits, supermarkets and such. But it feels like to me that the fourth goal related to food insecurity or nutrition insecurity will afford quite a deal more innovation and ideas. I'm wondering what proportion of the funds will go to that fourth goal and what types of programs, if any, or there will possibly be another listening session to address those.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. And you've got to respect anyone who comes up with their own acronym. Very impressive. In terms of I'm going to try and answer a couple of the things that came up, including your last comment. So there is nothing in the law, in the Food Desert Relief Act, that dictates how much or how little money can be spent on the various tools in our toolkit. I want to emphasize something that is very technical, but actually really important to what we're doing. Maybe I should have emphasized this more at the beginning. So under the law, I talked about how this is pretty powerful, that the Economic Development Agency of the state is making this issue a priority. That's new and bold and something we're very proud of. One thing that's in the law that is also very new and very bold is the ability to support this work through the sale of tax credits. That is not something that is traditionally done by NJEDA. And essentially what that means is that while the tax credits, that first tool in our toolkit, can only be used for new supermarkets and grocery stores, we can sell a portion of those tax credits essentially to generate cash and use the proceeds from that sale to pay for the grants, loans, and technical assistance. There's nothing in the law that says how many we can sell, how few we can sell. The only limitation is that we can't sell them for less than 85 cents on the dollar. So there is not an answer under the Food Desert Relief Act of how much would go to innovative programs and how much would go to supermarkets. And I don't think there should be, frankly, because situations and circumstances change over time. And so as we look to develop our program models, we'll be looking at what the appropriate suitable balance is for both the, as you've put, the demand side as well as the supply side, and again looking at what the sort of suite of solutions could look like. So I just wanted to really emphasize that. I know there's been a lot of comments on this presentation about supermarkets, and that is absolutely, they are a huge and vital and important part of this solution, but the Food Desert Relief Act is very intentional in taking a broad look at what kinds of solutions could be deployed to address this issue. So again, there's not a minimum or maximum there, and that'll be coming out. We'll have more detail on programmatic design in the coming months and more feedback requested then.
Thanks, Tara. Okay, Linda Doherty. You should be unmuted. You should be able to introduce yourself and let us know where you're calling from.
Sure. Hi, it's Linda Doherty. I'm with the New Jersey Food Council. We represent the grocery industry here in New Jersey, and I thank you for the opportunity to provide our feedback. Overall, I just want to start with providing an overview of today's grocer. As you know, we are an essential business and a lifeline business. And 2021 was the most disruptive on record, and we see that continuing into 2022 and that trend. We're seeing record food inflation. We're seeing almost a 60% turnover in our workforce. We are struggling with labor and the burden of the supply chain and lack of trucking and transportation. Also, we're seeing at the same time, due to COVID, the explosion of our online sales. And we're happy to see the growth in online SNAP right now. and we are all working as partners and stakeholders in bringing EWIC online. So we're an industry right now that's transforming dramatically. And we're talking here today about traditional approaches for bricks and mortar, but I think we are living in untraditional times, and that is having a direct impact on our grocery industry. So just a few comments I would like to make specifically about the carve out of certain specific blocks when you look at the matrix. So there were some supermarkets and bodegas originally in food desert communities. And it seems that I guess they've graduated out of these new food desert designations or centers. And I think some of them could be fragile at this time. So how is the department or EDA or this program going to continue to support those retailers that have made an investment in our food desert communities at this point? And also, I guess a suggestion we would have is, could we form a focus group with our state stakeholders to address those who have made the commitment in our food desert communities, and talk to them about their lessons learned, talk to them about the wealth of knowledge that they've gained, their experiences, the challenges, the stories that they have. I think that would be a great help to this program. So we'd like to suggest that. Also, another partner we think is missing here is the Department of Labor. You know, when you look at today's grocer and our workforce struggles, you know, whether it's the Great Resignation or childcare issues that, you know, we're having with our workforce, or, you know, teens no longer want to come to work, they're not working. How do we invest in our workforce, and how do we upgrade the skills of our workforce? You know, we're in need of apprentice programs for butchers and bakers and technology and online sales. So I'm hoping that as we're investing in our communities through this program, we're also looking at investing in individuals as well, overall in a more global sense. And I also want to lastly mention about the onboarding of town officials, because I think that other speaker raised a really good point about Keensburg. We've already called a few communities on the list to see if there was an interest in, you know, because they've been identified as a food desert and they just don't have the property, or they just can't sustain a supermarket. So I think another key partner as well would be our mayors and our community leaders. So thank you for the opportunity to share my comments.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much, Linda. Really valuable comments, and just some quick responses to them. I'm not sure if Dr. Wheeler wanted to weigh in on the more technical question, but regarding the, maybe I'll start with your last comment, certainly engaging the elected officials and municipalities is something that's really crucial, and something we're working to do as we build this program model out in the coming weeks, months, years. I want to kind of continue to emphasize, and we'll certainly do this as we talk to folks at the local level, that in essence, being in a food desert community does not mean that you have to build a supermarket, or that you have enough space or enough residents to sustain a supermarket. So I keep talking about this toolkit, and I know that it's a complex sort of metaphor that I don't know if it totally works, but the point we're trying to get across, I guess, is that being in a food desert community unlocks funding for that community to do a bunch of things. One could be to build or open a new supermarket, but it doesn't have to be. It would mean that Keensburg, for example, or I think someone earlier was talking about the Asbury Park, I forget what, there was another one mentioned earlier. It means that that community would be eligible through the Food Desert Relief Program to receive grants and loans and technical assistance that don't require a new supermarket ever to be built. In some cases, that might not be the solution the community wants, and in some cases, it might not be feasible, especially when we look in some of the more rural parts of the state that just don't have the density to sustain that. And so that's why we're trying to develop programs that would allow for a range of solutions that are best suited to a community's needs and what would be successful and sustainable. We have $250 million almost and 6 years to spend it, which is, as government funding goes, very significant, but it's not 60 years. And so we want to ensure that the programs that we develop can sustain and support themselves after this program, or at least this phase of this program ends. In terms of the comment around the workforce, I'm really glad you brought that up. I have a workforce development background myself, and so definitely hits close to home. I think that would be such a great example of a potential area as we talk about innovative solutions, thinking about the workforce strategies that could bring employment and family supporting wages to local residents, but also help to address some of the logistical or delivery related issues that may come up, especially with this just rapid transition to e-commerce, et cetera. And I also think the question, and someone had earlier raised this, I think it was Robert, I believe, around the supermarkets that are not within the food desert communities, but are adjacent to or proximate to. That's something that, again, as we build out the grants, loans, and technical assistance side of this work, that a food retailer that is of all types, it could be a farm, it could be a community garden, could be a food co-op, could be a small retailer, outside of the bounds of a food desert community, it is under the specs of the Food Desert Relief Act, it would be potentially allowable for that retailer to provide, to ultimately receive the benefit of funds through the Food Desert Relief Act if what was happening was that the food that was being purchased or processed or provided by them made its way to the people in the food desert community. So that's all still being developed. In terms of the focus group and the feedback, and I earlier there were some comments about feedback from community residents. I mean, we are always focused on hearing and getting a perspective on what things are like today, not what things maybe looked like even a year or 2 years ago. So we would certainly welcome that. I think opportunities for us to listen and learn from different convenings would be great. The one caveat that I'll just make as a sort of procedural one is that while we have programs that are up for public review like this, we really have to do more listening. I know I'm talking right now, but what we so we would welcome the opportunity to hear from folks. We still will have to be somewhat limited in how much we can respond specifically to ideas, but I've been taking copious notes during this and would certainly welcome the opportunity to do so offline. It kind of aligns with a lot of what the EDA does to engage many of the industry sectors that are priorities. And then similarly with community members, we would welcome the opportunity to listen and learn. Just know that I know it can be frustrating at times that we won't be able to respond as much as people would probably like, because we are in a formal public feedback process. And that does put some constraints because we want to ensure that all voices are able to be heard and that we aren't providing information to some folks and not others to ensure equity.
And just to answer the technical question about whether vacant land was included in the food desert methodology, it was not, primarily because we really wanted to focus on areas where there might be limited access to nutritious foods and food insecurity. And generally, communities that have large concentrations of vacant land tend to be either in industrial areas where there's not much population at all, or more rural areas. And these areas, from our data, did not really seem to correlate with some of the food desert signaling variables. So from the data, we noticed that there was a high number of urbanized communities that were showing these food desert characteristics. And of course, they tend to be built out and not have a great quantity of developable land. However, as Tara mentioned, the law is flexible enough such that there could be grants or technical assistance to establish other non-supermarket forms of food assets. So things like pop-up farmers markets, maybe community centers that make available healthier food options that are ordered from larger supermarkets outside of the food desert community. Things, innovative solutions that fit healthier food options into the existing urban context. And there was one choice we did make that did kind of help address the vacant land issue. We did allow for larger multi-municipality food deserts. So in many cases, we have a denser urban core in the same food desert as a more rural community with more vacant land. A good example of that is Penns Grove and Carneys Point are a single food desert. So you could have a new supermarket developed just across the border in Carneys Point that would serve Penns Grove. And there are a couple other examples of that, like Camden and Pennsauken, where you could have that in place.
Thanks, Dr. Wheeler. Okay, Michael Loberfeld. You've been unmuted. You can place your comment. Thank you. Hi, Michael. We're not hearing you on our end, but you have been unmuted. So I'm not sure what the issue is. I think what I'll suggest is that if you'd like to put your comment into the chat, I can certainly read it. The other option is to go to the njeda.com/program-specific-feedback and provide your comment there. Either way or both is fine on our end. And with that, we don't have any other hands raised. So if you did want to make a comment at this point, please raise your hand so that we can be sure and get to you. Okay, Lauren Spurge, we've moved on to you. You should be able to unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. This is a really exciting amount of money. I don't mean to be out of left field, but I feel like this is such a large amount of money, and especially in the district. I'm from Lafayette, New Jersey. I work in New Jersey SNAP-Ed and for Sioux Health Center. And we work a lot in food security, delivering food to people. But my question is, and this has kind of been broached by different people slightly, and by you guys, the moderators, has kind of been addressed a little bit, but I feel like this is a lot of money, and to assume that a grocery store is the solution, because to me, in the work that has been done to locate these communities, it seems to me as if it's an issue of poverty. So while food insecurity to me is poverty is the root cause of that. So, and to holistically address poverty instead of a subset of it, I feel like would be a better use. And obviously you can't speak for all of the districts, as someone else had said. New Jersey is very different in its landscapes, and that could work for some, but not for all. But maybe it could be expansion of affordable childcare, or things that could maybe move the needle on some of that poverty factors.
Thank you, Lauren. I think Tara's got a response for your comment.
Thanks, Lauren. So certainly, just to really reiterate, the Food Desert Relief Act is not just supermarkets. The solutions are not just supermarkets. They're part of the solution for some communities. They're a game changer and can be catalytic. But we recognize and have built a program model and have the ability to dedicate significant resources potentially to solutions other than new grocery stores. I will say, in terms of the scope of what we'll be considering, again, we'll be rolling that out in the coming months, but there are structural, foundational, multi-generational issues that really have resulted from disinvestment, structural racism in a lot of the communities that we're looking to target. These are very complex issues, but we also recognize that we can't, this money is a lot of money, but it's also somewhat bounded in the kinds of things it can be used for. I'm actually also leading EDA's work around strengthening the childcare sector in New Jersey, so very much take your comment to heart, but recognize that this is money that is dedicated to alleviating food deserts, improving food security through affordability, accessibility, et cetera. So we certainly welcome all ideas. I think that the direct connection to food security and food access will need to remain at the heart of whatever gets developed. But just to kind of reiterate, this is not solely for supermarkets, and we will welcome the creative ideas from community residents and stakeholders about different ways that these funds could be deployed through particularly the grants, loans, and technical assistance that we'll have available.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tara. So Michael, we're hoping that this works this time. You should be able to.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Michael Loberfeld. I live in Linden in Union County. I'm not an expert, but I have an interest. I've always, for many years, I've had an interest in people's health and nutrition, because I feel it's just, as another person said, it's just such a key to living a high quality and fulfilling life, to be healthy and to have good nutrition. So I'm very interested in this topic. And I think I support what you're doing. I think it's a great way to think globally while acting very locally. And I think I really love what I'm hearing about this. I know it's part of the program, that's the programming feedback that will come later in the process. But I did want to just say, in regard to public education campaigns, I think it would be good that once the healthier options do arrive in communities, or the expanded capacity, or when the program takes off, it would be good to have a public education campaign where even churches and community groups could publicize the availability of the nutritious food, really getting into the grassroots of the community, and even having people speaking out on how they now eat healthier, or sharing their story of how they're eating healthier and what made the difference, to encourage other people. That's my first comment. My other comment, I just wanted to make an analogy between food and music, because I love music. And so my analogy is that I know growing up and as a younger adult, I listened to a lot of pop music on commercial radio stations. And looking back, I realized it wasn't the best thing for me, because it didn't really align with my values, a lot of the commercially promoted music. And I think it's I just want to draw the parallel to food, that I think people are apt to eat whatever's convenient and available to them that's most in their area. So I think to give people the choice and to make it more convenient for them to make healthier choices can make all the difference in the world. Just in the same way that people are going to listen to whatever's on the radio, they're going to eat whatever's closest to them, or whatever's most convenient for them to get, or most economically viable for them to buy. So I really support the idea of increasing the access and the convenience of the nutritious choices, because that will help people form better habits and make a difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So those are our raised hands. Tara, I think you wanted to jump on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. And I thank you so much to all of our speakers and respondents. I wanted to also acknowledge, I see a note from Daryl in the chat that I wanted to respond to, and regarding scanning it, sort of equity of ability I gather, to respond to folks' comments. Certainly want to just reinforce that our desire and goal is to hear from everyone and have opportunities to hear from everyone. I know, Daryl, I believe you're connected with the Passaic Food Policy Council. We have already been speaking with Mary about attending the next meeting. I know there was one yesterday and that wasn't feasible, but we are actually already slated to attend the next one. And but I know that that's not till March. So if there was an opportunity that folks would like to have to speak sooner, we can certainly make that happen before, I think it was March 9th or March 12th, the next meeting that you all are having. So if folks would like to schedule ad hoc meetings, we can certainly, to the extent it's appropriate under the current environment we're in, which is we are providing a public feedback process. And so we can't, we were endeavoring at all, steps, and this is why I've had to be probably somewhat frustrating in my responses, that I can't answer about what the program will do because we have not yet put forth what the program will do. So we need to ensure that that access is as evenly distributed as possible, but we really want to listen and hear, and so would welcome the opportunity to have those opportunities for dialogue. We in this listening session, we have attempted to listen, but also to clarify. And so I will acknowledge that I spoke quite a bit more today than I did last night. And part of the reason is felt that there were a number of things that folks were perhaps either misinterpreting or maybe we or I wasn't being clear enough. So that's why I've been a broken record a few times on a few of the key points. So just want to continue to emphasize that we're interested in an open dialogue. You can reach out to us, submit feedback, and we look forward to learning and hearing from all of you. So
Thanks,
I think
Tara.
for patience, unless there's anyone else with a hand raised, I think we are. I will let you wrap us up, but I will thank you all for the substantive feedback and for sticking around for a couple hours.
Thanks, Tara, and thanks everyone for joining us. Just a reminder, the link to program-specific feedback is in the chat. Follow us on social. All of our social handles are at NJEDA.com. They're in front of you there. Find the Economic Recovery Act on our website, and then also stay attuned to our events page where we will announce any future listening sessions on this and any other program associated with the Economic Recovery Act. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate it. Have a nice afternoon.